Alright, so today we're gonna talk about human factors, specifically the second big concept about SRM, or Single Pilot Resource Management. We are talking about risk management. We will be discussing what actually is risk management, the four main risk factors of our flights, and how we can remember them by using methods like PAVE or the 5 P's checklist. We will be comparing those two checklists, and I will be trying to give you some other good insights about this concept. Risk management is not as nearly as long as aeronautical decision making, but I think that this video might be helpful for someone that just wants to dive deep into this concept, to have it in just one video, the whole idea of risk management. In case you want the more bite-sized videos about this, I will leave the link of that playlist in the description of this video as well as on the screen right now. Hi, my name is Jorge Muñoz. I'm a senior instructor pilot working in El Salvador, and as always this video is going to be divided in different sections, so here in the screen you will see the timestamps for each specific section, and also you will find the timestamps linked in the description of this video and also in a pinned comment down below, so you can find what you are looking for in an easier way. Please feel free to jump to the timestamp that you are interested in, but if you want to see the whole video, then I appreciate it quite a lot. Alright, so today we're gonna talk about risk management, one of the components of this whole universe of human factors inside aviation. In the last video of this series about human factors, we finally finished talking about aeronautical decision making, or ADM. So now we're tackling the second theme into human factors. To do that, we will talk about the 4 risk factors that you have to be aware of during your flight, and how 2 acronyms can help you remember those 4 sources of risk that you have to take care of. Okay, so risk management. What is it and why is it integrated into this whole thing of human factors? Well, risk management is exactly what the name says it is. During each flight, the pilot has to make decisions over and over again, pretty much the whole flight non-stop. But cannot only do blind decisions, they have to be effective decisions, which is the whole point of why this human factors thing exists in the first place. First, you have to identify that there is actually a risk of some sort. If you don't acknowledge that, then it's like the risk pretty much doesn't exist until an accident happens. But by that moment it will be too late, right? Once you know that there is a risk for you and for the airplane, you can assess it, see and think how you can manage it, or ideally how you can mitigate it or eliminate it. That means taking a decision on how to deal with that risk, how to fight it back and how to solve it. Now, if you're thinking, how can you actually learn to identify what elements can be a source of risk for you and for the flight? Look, there is always a lot going on an airplane, but actually there are 4 categories in which you can divide what might be a source of risk, and the way or the order that personally I like to think about them is going from the smallest one to the biggest one, because it makes it easier for me to remember them. It's easier for me to think from the smallest to the biggest. That means let's start with what is inside the cabin, and let's just go from there. So the smallest thing in the list is you, or me, the pilot. I'm inside the cabin. I am actually smaller than the cabin, but I am in charge of it. Second, the airplane. Okay, the airplane is bigger than me and then the cabin together. Alright, but the airplane is actually smaller than the environment. That's the third element, environment. And finally, 4, the type of operation. That is something that is not physically visible, but it is always present. Then it is omnipresent. It is everywhere because it is what we are doing. In my head, it is the biggest thing around here. So yeah, those are the 4 sources or elements of risk or the categories that we can use to classify from where the risk is coming from, however you want to see them, from the tiniest, the pilot, then the airplane, after that the environment, and finally the biggest of them all, the type of operation. Now, that's my personal process to remember this, but just as we do with the IDM process, when we use acronyms like I'm safe and decide, pilots also use acronyms to remember these 4 sources of risk that we have to manage during flight. I think that the most used one is PAVE. I think that's how it is pronounced, but here you have how it is written. And that one stands for Pilot, Aircraft, Environment and External Pressures. The P for pilot, which is, as we said, the very first risk element. But why the heck are we the first risk element? If, you know, I'm the pilot, I'm the one that knows what we are doing. Okay, that's a fair point, but for you to not be a source of risk, evaluate if your training, experience and fitness is good for the flight. Let me pull an example for you. If you have just finished your private pilot license and you have no idea of what the heck is a radial or a standard instrument departure, and on top of that you have had a cold since the day before yesterday, but still you decide to go flying with someone while there is a low ceiling of clouds covering almost the whole sky, let me tell you that you are probably a big source of risk for your flight. Second, aircraft. You have to know if the thing that you are flying with is airworthy. You have to know the performance and limitations that it has, how to make the proper configurations of the aircraft. If you're flying that airplane, it's because you know how to fly that airplane. Or if you're a student that you're learning how to do it. But still, to learn how to fly an airplane, you need to know the manual behind it. If you don't, then the airplane becomes a risk factor. Third in the list, we have environment. What surrounds the airplane and the whole flight, such as the airports that you are using or planning to use, or the airport's conditions as well. Maybe some of the runways are under maintenance, or the taxiways. Maybe there is a heavy snowstorm over the airport where you are intending to land, or there is no gas station over there and you really need one if you want to come back to where you came from. I'm just throwing some examples here and there so you can have an idea of what I'm referring to. Like, there could happen a million different things. Here you have to consider as well things like terrain, airspace and weather. Like, what if you're going to fly for an extended period of time over mountainous terrain? What is your plan of actions if something happens over there? Maybe there is a thunderstorm between where you are and where you plan to go. Or who knows, heavy winds or freezing conditions over there on your destination. Again, I'm just saying what is on the top of my mind. Or if we are talking about airspace, do you know if you need a clearance or if you had to ask for permission even before the flight started? Who are you going to talk to? Maybe you just entered a military training zone and you didn't even notice. Or your airplane doesn't even have the minimum equipment for the airspace that you're trying to go or where you need to go. And the list just goes on and on. And to end this PAVE thing, we have external pressures, the omnipresent being during your flight. Discover such things like, what even is the purpose of the flight? Are you forcing it for no reason? Could you have waited maybe for the weather to get better? Do you really need to keep your schedule at all costs? If you are an instructor just like me, maybe your boss is forcing you to achieve a certain amount of hours each week or each month. Or you just skipped your briefing so you can do the flight hour in time. So the flight after you can also be completed in time. What I'm trying to say is, don't force it. Don't let external pressures to be a risk factor into your flight. To end this video, we also have the 5 P's acronyms, I guess. which is extremely similar to PAVE, and it serves the exactly same purpose, helping you remember the 4 risk factors that we have been talking about. The 5 P's are pilot, passengers, plane, programming, and plan. As I said, they are extremely similar to PAVE. So wrapping up this video, risk management refers that there are always going to be risk factors during our flight, and we are the ones that have to identify and mitigate them. To explain this better, we can categorize them into 4 elements: pilot, aircraft, environment, and type of operation. To help you remember these 4 elements in an easier way, you can use acronyms like PAVE or the 5 P's, or like in my case, thinking of them like going from the smallest physical element, the pilot, to the biggest one, the type of operation. In the end, it doesn't matter what you use to remember. The point is that you do actually have to remember this. And every mind has its own way to remember things differently. That is why almost always there is different ways to learn and remember new things. Before we continue to the next portion of this video, I wanted to mention that if you want to become an outstanding private pilot, if you are curious and you want to prepare yourself in the best possible way for all the tests to come, or even if you are an advanced pilot who wants to remember and perfect the basis of the VFR world, or maybe you want to start your private pilot training with a heads up over the others, I highly recommend you should check out my book Essential Knowledge for Private Pilot. You will find the link of the book in the description of this video. It is an Amazon Kindle exclusive. This book uses the 2 most effective study techniques in the whole world, active recall and spaced repetition, and it applies them into aviation. If that sounds good to you, then please go check out the book down below. You will be helping me a lot with this channel. The book is available in English as well in Spanish. Remember, you shouldn't be studying hard, you should be studying effectively, and with this book you can do just that. That was just a little plug. So now let's continue to the latter part of risk management and the 5 P's checklist. So today we're gonna continue talking about risk management, specifically about the 5 P's, since in the last video we talked in depth about PAVE. We will see the similarities and a couple of differences between these 2, and hopefully by the end of this video I would have made the point that it doesn't really matter how you remember to be aware of the risk factors as long as you actually remember them. To add up to that, at the end of the video, we will see a couple of questions that can also help you to identify the risk factors in all the phases of your flight. Just to remember a bit, when we talk about risk management, we have 4 risk factors to take care of, and something like PAVE can help us to remember those factors. To serve that same purpose, we also have the 5 P's checklist, which is another acronym that stands for pilot, passengers, plane, programming, and plan. As I said, it's very similar to what PAVE means, and what it has to offer also. But I want to explain it anyway, so there is absolutely no doubt about it, and it does has 1 or 2 little differences. The first P, pilot. We need to make sure that we are not a source of risk for our own flight. How? Well, if we are sick or in any bad physical condition, if we don't have enough training on the particular airplane we're going to fly, assuming that we are not under training, if you don't have enough knowledge of what you are going to do, all of those things will make us a source of risk for the flight. Second P, passengers. Here's where the 5 P's vary from PAVE, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this. You are not alone in the airplane. Your passengers can be your allies or your foes. They can be on your side and help you, or they can be a hazard to you. Maybe you have doctors, nurses, engineers, or maybe even another pilot and you didn't even knew about it. All of them can help if an emergency develops. But on the other side, maybe one of your passengers might be extremely drunk, or maybe under the influence of drugs, or maybe you have a really old passenger that is under medical treatment and needs special attention. Just to throw some examples. If you have emergency doors in your airplane, make sure you have a strong, young and fit passenger next to it, so he or she can help the crew open the door. If you put a passenger that is old and weak over there, he or she probably won't be able to do the job and will always be an obstacle for other people to try to open the door. The next P is for plane. You have to know your limitations, performance and procedures, proper configurations and more about your airplane. Be sure that it is airworthy and which or if all the instruments and system of the airplane are working properly. The more stuff you are missing about the airplane that you are flying with, the more it becomes a hazard. After that we have programming. This one goes as a complement for the previous P, where you make sure to have your airplane in a proper condition and configuration for each specific part of your flight. The fifth and final P stands for plan, which basically covers the environment and external pressures from PAVE. This means that you have to be aware of the factors that might be important over there in the airport where you are trying to land, like present weather or closed runways. Also, you will have to look out for the airspace and the terrain where you're going to fly through. If you're going over mountainous terrain or water, what are you going to do if you have to perform an emergency landing over there? Think about the possible weather that you may encounter during your flight. At some point during your flight, not necessarily the whole flight. Can you and your airplane deal with that bad weather? This last P also considers the purpose of the flight and the primary reason why you need to make it and maintain it scheduled. That means, can you wait for the next day if you see that today the weather is not that good? Or do you really have an urgency to complete that flight? What will be the outcome or the consequences for you if you don't do that flight right now? What happens if you wait a few hours to take off? Remember that urgencies can frequently end up in misfortunes. Also keep in mind that you should be using these PAVE and 5Ps resources before the flight begins, when you are planning the flight, and continue using it until the flight is done. To end up with risk management, let's remember the parts in which a flight is divided. We start with all what is before takeoff, then the climb and initial cruise, the en route cruise, descent, and the approach to the airport and landing. Each one of these portions of the flight have unique risks and hazards that we have to be aware of at the moment of executing the flight. You have to make multiple decisions throughout these 5 parts of the flight in order to keep it safe. In other words, you as a pilot have to make decisions throughout the whole flight. But in order to make those decisions good and effective decisions, at all moments you have to be aware of the situation you are in right now and be awaiting for what is to come next. Go on and ask yourself what has changed in this flight since the last time I asked myself this same question, or if anything has changed at all. Is everything going just as expected? If an unexpected change actually happened, does it put a considerable amount of risk into the operation, or can you go along with it just as a minor inconvenience? And no matter how big or small that change is, there is always the possibility that you can actually solve it or mitigate it. So think, what can you do to control that risk? And so that's the end of this very long video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or at least found it somewhat interesting, please give it a like. If you learned something new, then I'll appreciate quite a lot if you consider subscribing to the channel. And if you just feel like it, you can also follow me in Instagram. The link is also down below in the description. I upload very cool photos over there. I try to upload videos every week, mainly explaining topics that has to do in a way or another with the IFR world, but in a logical order. Also, I will probably be talking a lot about aviation and education in general, but always trying to contribute something new to you. If you have a question or an opinion about something I said during this video, or if you want to talk to me about something, please feel free to comment down below, or you can get in touch with me in Instagram. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you found this video interesting, then you should go check out the whole playlist of human factors, or maybe the complete video about ADM, aeronautical decision making. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye!